Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to a very special evening. This is on behalf of the India International Center and the Foundation for Universal Responsibility of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. It was really at his urgings that he has often described India as the guru and himself as the chela, and urged that we consider and evolve a lecture series that looks at the different schools of Indian philosophy, and said, well, you know, my old friend Dr.Karan Singh, who he's known for, I don't know what, 50, 60 years, would be a wonderful person to do an introduction. And that warmed my heart in many, many ways, because I've had the deep privilege of, sort of first meeting Dr. Karan Singh more than 40 years ago as a college student when I interviewed him for a radio program. My introduction of him is going to be somewhat longer than he would otherwise merit, because I mean he would be the classic candidate for something he needs no introduction, because I think his work and ideas are so very well known. But I think in the context of the lecture today, Vedanta Today, it has enormous significance, because he's philosopher, statesman, scholar in politics, but not a politician, a devotee of Lord Shiva, a connoisseur of music, a truly Renaissance man. You know, he was born in Cannes, in France, and has in many ways embodied the aspirations of a Vedantin. And we thought we would start with the Vedanta, though it's sort of, the Vedanta is in one of the ways it's described as the end of the Vedas, was because it provides an excellent umbrella, an overarching understanding in which the other schools, which can be sort of quite, how do I put it, detailed and technical, for us to get a feel, a flavor of this aspect of our civilizational heritage from a person who spoke not just as a scholar and a philosopher, but from who he is and what he has embodied. And so it's worth noting that he has spawned so many areas of work and interest and organizations that he's been involved with. You know, he started his political life at 18 years old, appointed regent, on the intervention of the Prime Minister, head of the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir for the next 18 years, and then governor. And then after all this, he gives up his privy purse, gives up his governorship, enters democratic politics, and is at that point appointed the youngest minister of the Union Cabinet. He has over the years served as Indian ambassador to the United States. He has been an author who has written so diversely, 25 books. These range from Shadow and Sunlight on Dogri folk songs, Prophet of Indian Nationalism on Sri Aurobindo. He goes on to write on Welcome to Moonrise, more poems, Population, Poverty and the Future of India, In Defense of Religion, Religions of India, Bridge to Immortality, on the Mundaka Upanishad, The Mountain of Shiva, a novel, As I See It, a Karan Singh reader. There have been several documentary films produced on him. So just the range of his writings reveal the diversity of ideas and engagements in his life. He's been founder of the International Center for Science, Culture and Consciousness, President, People's Commission on Environment and Development, Indian Council for Cultural Relations, chairman of the Virat Hindu Samaj, which seeks social reforms in Hinduism on the basis of universal Vedantic values, Temple of Understanding, Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Fund Vice Chairman, Sanskrit Board, head of Project Tiger, Member Club of Rome, Club of Budapest. I mean, it's overwhelming. The range of areas and fields that he is engaged in at the pinnacle and the peak. And in some ways, this embodies and represents the diversity and the coming together of numerous strands of India's philosophical ideas and ideals that the Vedanta brings together. And the Vedanta, in an all-inclusive philosophy, has in recent decades, or more than that, really from the Ramakrishna Vedanta tradition, the people have begun to refer to it as Neo-Vedanta. So that in the manner in which it has the vitality to adopt and adapt to the imperatives of today's world. And so I'm very delighted to welcome a distinguished speaker who in his life and in his scholarship embodies these very values and aspirations. So may I, in the traditional Tibetan style, because we are a foundation of the Dalai Lama, welcome Dr. Karan Singh with traditional. Dr. Karan Singh will speak for about half an hour, 45 minutes, and we will then, maybe I'll do a question or two if something comes up, but we'd like to sort of conclude with the, how to put it, what I know will be the magic of his talk.
We don't need to stand for the martyrs, we need to stand for the martyrs. Martyrs Day. I'll do it. Today is Martyrs Day, as you know. Maybe just be quiet. We don't have to stand, but let's be quiet for a minute and remember the martyrs who sacrificed so dearly for the country. Thank you. Talking of martyrs, I remember actually meeting Mahatma Gandhi. I must be one of the very few people in this room who actually met him. He used to visit anybody's house, but he was very kind. When he came to Kashmir in 1947, he came to us and to meet my father and my mother. And I insisted on being there. I was in a wheelchair at the time. Nonetheless, I was there and did see him, and so, that's something I thought might interest you. Thank you, Rajiv, for that very generous introduction. Have I really done all the things that you mentioned? I don't think so. I don't remember that. Professor M.G.K. Menon, President, India International Centre, and distinguished members of the audience. We live in an age of great turmoil and transition. The old is collapsing and the new is struggling to be born, and we find ourselves precariously poised between a vanishing past and an indeterminate future. Wherever I go around the world, I find this turmoil, it can be creative, it can be destructive, but there is a turmoil. There is a Samudra Manthana, as it were. And as you know, Samudra Manthana first of all produced a terrible poison before the gift started coming. And in this sort of a situation, when there are no established landmarks, there are new hopes and aspirations. Young people are full of energy, but there are no clear guidelines. And therefore, there is a great quest for new certitudes. All the gods that we worshipped in the last century have collapsed. We saw the rise and fall of Nazism, the rise and fall of fascism, the rise and fall of communism, the rise and fall of Maoism, the almost fall of capitalism. I mean, all these isms seem to have failed ultimately. And therefore, there's a quest for some inner clarity. And that is why we look to our scriptures. Not in order to go back to some mythical golden age. That is not possible. even if it were desirable, it's not possible, because the arrow of time goes only in one direction, onwards, chareveti, as the Veda says. And therefore we look into our scriptures, and we are particularly fortunate in India generally. We have a huge corpus of scriptures, whether it is Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. We have massive scriptural writings and compilations. For Hinduism particularly, which is the religion I know best, we have a unique corpus from the very dawn of civilization down to the present day, unbroken for thousands of years. And one of the great features of Hinduism is that it is based not upon the teachings of one book or one teacher or one point in time. It is the result of the collective wisdom, as it were, of the rishis over perhaps a 1,000-year period. And therefore we are not bound closely by any particular text. There's more scope for creative reinterpretation of the texts. And I often liken the basic, the most sacred texts of Hinduism, the Vedas, to the Himalayas, the great Himalayan range, which, if you remember, Kalidasa has a beautiful description in the Kumara Sambhavam. Astyuttarasyam dishi devatatma Himalayo nam nagadhiraja purvaha paroto yanidhi vagahya stitaha prithivya iva manadanda. This great range stretches from the west to the eastern sea like a measuring rod, against which alone can the greatness of the world be gauged. So if the Vedas are like the Himalayas, then the Upanishads are like those great peaks in the Himalayas that you see when you go from Delhi to Calcutta, for example, or you go from here to Nepal. Those great peaks bathed in the eternal sunlight of wisdom. And the Upanishads, to my mind, represent the high watermark not only of Hindu philosophy, but surely one of the great watermarks of world philosophy. They are known as the Vedanta because, for two reasons. Firstly, because chronologically they come at the end of the Vedic collections. The Vedas, the Brahmanas, the Aranyakas, and the Upanishads. They come at the end of the Vedic collections. And also because they represent, as it were, the highest peaks of the Vedas. Therefore they are known as Vedanta. And the Upanishads, of course, are absolutely fabulous texts. I'm not going to go into the details. They were supposed to be 108 at one time, but Adi Shankara commented on 11. And those 11 became really, as it were, because of his commentaries, they became the principal Upanishads. And they are dialogues. And this is an important point to remember. Ours is a dialogic civilization. The Indic civilization, unlike many of the Western civilizations, is a dialogic civilization. It's not a revelatory civilization. The Vedas are dialogues between the teacher and the Shishyas. Some very sharp questions are posed by the students. The Buddha dialogued all his life. Throughout his life he spoke with his disciples. Mahavira did the same. So the Indic tradition of a dialogic civilization is very important. Again, because that gives us the opportunity to clarify many points. Whereas if you have a revelation, then that is it. You can't question it. You can interpret it perhaps to some extent. So these are, the Upanishads in fact are dialogues, and they range from short cryptic texts, 12 verses only, the Mandukya, 18 verses, the Ishavasya, to the larger Upanishads, many hundreds of verses, the Chandogya and the Brihadaranyaka. They are so full of content that really to present them is an almost impossible task. And therefore what I intend to do is to try and present 6 cardinal principles that are either found in the Upanishads or emerge from them, which I think taken together represent a holistic, an alternative philosophy to the one that we generally live under. And one thing that strikes me is that instead of losing their relevance, as we go onwards in time, as globalization is taking place, these concepts become increasingly relevant now rather than less relevant. I think that is a very special feature of the Vedanta. Because frankly, unless a text has contemporary relevance, then it's really useful only for university scholars or researchers or others. Unless it's helpful to us now, here and now. And the Upanishads are constantly stressing, iheva pravalanti kama. Now, you must do it now. You can't wait for an afterlife. You can't postpone spiritual development to some life to come. You have to act now. So there's a sense of immediacy that is found in the Upanishads, I think, is very important. Now let me come to those 6 principles or concepts that I mentioned. The first, and in some ways the most comprehensive concept, is the unity of all existence. Isha vasyamidam sarvam yat kinch jagatyam jagat. Whatever has existed, does exist, or will exist, is permeated by, illuminated by, inhabited by the same divine light. In other words, the Big Bang, if it took place, was not only an explosion of light, not only an explosion of sound, but also an explosion of consciousness. And that is why, after all these millions and billions of years, consciousness is beginning to develop. So the all-pervasive Brahman, this is the correct use of the word Brahman, is everywhere. Brahmevidam amritam purustad brahma paschat brahma dakshinaschotarena adaschordham japrasritam brahmevidam vishwamidam varishtam. This entire magnificent universe is the Brahman. It is not life negating. The universe is not some terrible accident which should never have happened or some ghastly mistake. It is a magnificent manifestation of the divine. The billions and billions of galaxies around us are a manifestation of the divine. So that, I think, the first concept we have to grasp is the concept of the all-pervasive Brahman. The scientists, as you know, are looking for a unified field theory that would cover all the weak interactions and the strong interactions and so on. Well, the concept of the Brahman, as it were, is the philosophical correlate of the universal field theory and gives us the theoretical basis for striving to seek the unity. The second concept, which is extremely important in the Vedanta, is the concept of the Atman, the self, the individual self. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hriddeshe tishtati. The Lord resides in the heart of all beings. All of us encapsulate a spark of the divine. And fanning that spark of the divine into the blazing fire of spiritual realization is the ultimate goal of sadhana and of human existence. So you have the all-pervasive Brahman and you have the Atman within each human being. Those are 2 basic concepts that have to be grasped. And the Atman is in everybody, regardless of race or sex or color or religion or anything else. It is universal. We are human because we do encapsulate that spark of the divine, the Atman. So you have these 2, the Brahman and the Atman. And then you have the third concept, which is absolutely critical. And that is the concept of yoga, of joining them. Yoga comes from the same root as the word to yoke, yuj, to join. Yoga is the philosophy and methodology of combining the Atman and the Brahman, or of becoming aware of the Brahman. That's what yoga really means. It's not only the physical exercises that go by that name. They are a small part of Hatha Yoga. But that is not yoga. Yoga is a much more profound concept. And yoga involves the methodology and the sometimes the technology, the methodology, the philosophy of bringing about a union between the Atman and the Brahman. And there are, as you know, in our tradition, there are 4 main paths of yoga. There is the Jnana Yoga, the way of the mind. The mind clarified by meditation. The mind, the Buddhists particularly are very good at meditation. The discrimination between the real and the unreal. Rather like Plato, if you recall, talks about the fact that all we actually see are shadows thrown on the wall of a cave. We do not see either the objects themselves or the light that illuminates them. So the Jnana Yoga is the way of the mind clarified by meditation and one-pointed. Not just the discursive mind that we all are very familiar with, but a mind that is focused on trying to see the truth behind outer objects. The great sayings of the Upanishads, Tattvamasi, you are that. Tattvamasi Shvetaketu. Aham Brahmosmi, I am the Brahman. Brahme vidam amritam purusta. These are all great sayings of the Upanishads as a result of the clarified mind of the rishis who were able to absorb these great truths. So that is the way of wisdom, the Jnana Yoga. The second is the way of devotion, the Bhakti Yoga. If the Jnana Yoga is the way of the mind, Bhakti Yoga is the way of the heart. And unless the heart opens in love and devotion and dedication to the divine, your aeroplane doesn't take off with only one engine. You need both. In the Jnana Yoga, you do not need a form. You can meditate on a formless divine, or on a flame, or on anything else. But for the Bhakti Yoga, I feel personally that unless you have some form, you are not able to really fall in love with something that is formless. And that's what you have to do to fall in love with the divine. That's what St. Teresa of Avila did. That's what St. Francis of Assisi did. That is what Mirabai did. That is what Surdas did. That is what all the great bhaktas of the world, the Nayanmars and the Alvars of South India, they fell in love with the divine. So unless you open your heart to the divine love, the Bhakti Yoga does not work. And the saints around the world, whether it's Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi or Hazrat Amir Khusro, look at his extraordinary poems. Chhap tilak sab chheen li, mose naina lagai ke. I mean, it's love poetry. Khusro nizam ki baat jo lagi mohe suhagan ki. So one can give a lot of examples, but I'm simply making the point that the Bhakti Yoga, the way of devotion, is an extremely powerful and extremely important methodology of joining the human and the divine. The third main path, and I'm talking of the main paths, there are hundreds and hundreds of different paths within each one of these categories. But the third main path is the Karma Yoga, the way of the arms, the hands. If Jnana Yoga is the way of the mind, if Bhakti Yoga is the way of the heart, then the Karma Yoga is the way of the hand, the way of action. And not just any action. Everybody is acting, and there's no big deal in action. You can't live unless you're acting. But action dedicated to the divine. Action as an offering to the divine. I'm a worshipper of Lord Shiva. Yat yat karma karomi tat tat akhilam shambho tavaradhanam. Whatever I do, I try and offer to Lord Shiva, including this lecture. So this offering of what you do, the Gita also brings this up. The Gita is not really an Upanishad, it is a sort of derivative text from the Upanishads, but it is a very important text. They talk a lot about karma. Yata pravrittir bhutanam yen sarvam idam tatam sukarmana tam abhyarcha siddhim vindati manava. By one's work, one can move towards perfection. That is the message of the Upanishads. Kurvan nevihi karmani jishi vithet shatam samaha evam tvai nanyate tosti na karma lipyate nare. By acting here in this world, you can live for 100 years and achieve spiritual illumination. It's a powerful statement they make. They're not tentative statements. You may do this, you may do that. You can do it if you are really able to dedicate your works to the divine. Whatever form of the divine it may be. It may be the Christian missionaries who dedicate their works to Jesus Christ, or the Ramakrishna mission who dedicate it to their guru, or whatever form of the divine. That's not important. The important point is the act of inner dedication, and the act of constant dedication, and the act of constant awareness, of which again the Buddhists are very good. Constant awareness of ourselves and how we are acting. So this is a ethical action based on love and compassion and fellowship and friendship. This is the karma yoga, the way of works. And then there's the fourth path, and that is the Raj Yoga, the royal path. And that is the path that involves our breathing, the postures that you hear about. Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. Yoga, Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the stilling of the modifications of the mind. And the stilling is through various methodologies, through various meditations, through various asanas, and so on. And so the Raja Yoga is trying to develop the psychic powers within each human being. It is believed that at the base of the spine, wound 3.5 times around the Mooladhara, is a power known as the Kundalini, the serpent power. And that power is normally dormant. But through certain disciplines and practices, that power can be awakened. And as it wakes, it can be encouraged to move up the spine, in which there are 7 chakras or centers of energy. And as it moves up, it energizes these chakras until finally it floods into the Sahasradhara, the 1,000-petal lotus in the brain. It's a very complex matter, I'm not going into it, but I'm just pointing out that these methodologies of modification of consciousness, of raising of consciousness, are very much part of the tradition. The Upanishads also. Swadeha maranim kritva, pranavam chotararanim, dhyan nirmasana abhyasat, dev pashet nigudavat. One uses the body as the lower path and the pranava, the om, as the higher, and you do the churning and the fire appears. And so this Raja Yoga is also a very important part. You have the Jnana Yoga, the Bhakti Yoga, the Karma Yoga, and the Raj Yoga, which is developing the inner psychic and spiritual potentialities of the human being. For example, when the Turkish dervishes are dancing in ecstasy, I'm sure that their kundalini in some way or the other is awake, because you couldn't ever dance like that for hours and hours in ecstasy. And let me also tell you that these yogas are not mutually exclusive. They can be combined. In fact, they should be combined. And I would say that everyone now, in this age, when there is such a lot of tension and turmoil, everyone has to partake of all the 4 yogas. You have to be a jnani to some extent. You have to read some scriptures. You have to be a bhakta if you have to have some focus of devotion. You have to be a karma yogi. You must be able to dedicate your works. And you have to practice some sort of pranayama or whatever to develop your inner capacities. So yoga, therefore, as you will see, addresses the intellectual, the emotional, the physical, and the psychic elements in the human being. and therefore represents, as it were, a holistic philosophy, which is of great importance. Now, what the relationship exactly between the Atman and the Brahman is again a matter for the schools. The Advaitas think that there's no difference. Advaitas think difference. You have Madhavacharya, Vallabhacharya, Shankaracharya. They've got various theories. I'm not going into that. I'm simply making the basic point that the union of the Atman and the Brahman is the final goal of human existence. Those are the first 3 points. The Atman, the Brahman, and the yoga joining them together. Then there are 3 more points which I think are significant. The first is the concept of the world as a family. The much quoted Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Except that everybody in Delhi mispronounces it and thinks it has something to do with Vasudeva Krishna. Nothing to do with Krishna. It's Vasudha Eva Kutumbakam. The world itself is a family. And if you go to Parliament House, I'm not going to comment on what happens within Parliament House, and that you are witness to that yourself. But if you go to Parliament House, in the first entry into Central Hall, there's this beautiful shloka. Ayam nija paroveti gananam lagu chetasam udar charitanam tu vasudhaiva kutumbakam. This is mine, that is yours, is a small and narrow way of looking at existence. For those of the higher consciousness, udar charitanam vasudha eva kutumbakam, the world itself is a family. And I think that as we move into the global society, we have to interiorize this. Because ultimately, whatever our race or our religion or our sex or our sexual preference or our caste or our creed or whatever it may be, ultimately we all have to look upon ourselves as members of a single family. And remember, single family is not a single market. A market is essentially an exploitative structure, whereas a family is a supportive structure. And if you are really a family, then you don't exploit other members of the family, you support them. How can you have a family in which 2 people are dying of overeating and 2 people are starving of malnutrition? That's not a family. Therefore, this concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is a much more profound and important concept than is generally understood. And unless, I repeat, unless we move as a civilization, as a world civilization, unless we move towards this idea of the world as a family and transcend the singularities and the differences and the polarities, we are not going to be able to survive. And that, I think, is something which is tremendously important. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam is the essential mantra for the emerging world order. If we are ever going to have a world civilization, this is the only motto that they can take, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world itself, or the world alone, is a family. The 5th point, which is very important in the Upanishads, the essential unity of all religions. The Rig Veda has it, Ekam Sat Vipraha Bahuda Vadanti. The truth is one, the wise call it by many names. This is an absolutely astounding idea. It's perhaps the only religion in the world which doesn't say that my religion is the only one that is correct and yours is wrong. It says all paths lead to the same goal. And unless we accept the multiplicity of paths to the divine, there will never be peace on earth. I can say that for me, my religion is the best. But I cannot say, therefore, that because you do not follow my religion, therefore you can be blown up or shot or tortured or murdered or persecuted or prosecuted. Down through the centuries, look at the atrocities that have been committed in the name of religion. How many people have been crucified? How many people have been murdered? How many people have been persecuted and tortured in the name of religion? What sort of religion is this that tortures people or kills people? And every religion looks upon its God as being merciful. Shiva is Karpur Gaurum Karuna Avataram, the avatar of the incarnation of Karuna, of compassion. The Muslims begin their prayers with Bismillah or Rahman or Rahim, God the merciful, the compassionate. Jesus Christ mounted the cross because he believed that he was atoning for the sins of humanity. So these are all the figures themselves are compassionate. But look at the way they have been used. Religion is a very double-edged weapon, I'm sorry to say. Religion can be used for the most profound and ennobling purposes, and religion can be used, or misused rather, in a most obnoxious and abominable way. And therefore we have to understand when we talk of religion, and this is the mantra for the interfaith movement. If Vasudev Kutumbakam is the mantra for the global society, the mantra for the interfaith movement, in which many of us have been involved for decades, is Ekam Satvipraha Bahuda Badanti. And there is a mystical tradition in all the great religions of the world. I think an essential reading is a book which came out 50, 60 years ago, The Perennial Philosophy by Aldous Huxley. Many of you may have read it. That gives us comparisons between the different religions and how everybody sings in ecstasy. When you finally get to that consciousness, when you transcend the differences, there is that golden thread of mysticism. Francis Thompson in one of his poems says, "Not where the wheeling systems darken, and our benumbed conceiving soars, the drift of pinions would we hearken, beats at our own clay-shuttered doors. The angels keep their ancient places, turn but a stone and start a wing. 'Tis ye, 'tis your estranged faces that miss the many-splendored thing." The many-splendored light of the Atman, the Noor-e Ilahi of the Sufis, the Ek Onkar of the Sikh Gurus, the Bodhicitta of the Buddhists, or what the seer of the Upanishad says, Vedaham etam purusham mahantam aditya varanam tamasapparasta. I have seen that great being shining like 1,000 suns beyond the darkness. That light is there. Religion is supposed to lead us to that light. Religare, it comes from the Latin word which means to bring people together. And yet look at the way we have misused and abused religion. But we must therefore not abandon religion. We mustn't throw the baby out along with the bathwater. What we have to do is to reinterpret religion, to rearticulate religion, to renew our roots in religion and try and see what are the universal features that are significant and valuable even today. And now I come to the sixth and final. I've spoken about the first three, the all-pervasive Brahman, the Atman in each human being, and the yoga that joins the two. I've spoken of the world as a family. I've spoken of the unity of all religions. And the final point, the welfare of all beings. Bahujana Sukhaya, Bahujana Hitaya. No better definition of socialism ever in the world. Whether it is Marx's Das Kapital or whether it is huge books by other philosophers, just these two words, Bahujana Sukhaya, Bahujana Hitaya, for the welfare of the many, for the happiness of the many. That is what we must work for. Unfortunately, we've become much too self-centered. All our works either for ourselves or for our families or for our caste or our community or even for our country. But the welfare of all beings. And when we talk of when Swami Vivekananda set up the Ramakrishna mission, he gave them one mantra. Atmano mokshartham jagat hitaya cha. Work for your own salvation, but also for the welfare of the world. That's what we've neglected in India. That is why, despite these great philosophies that we still have the largest number of poor people in the world. Of course, there have been invasions, there have been colonialism and all. But our religion also has got to teach us to fulfill our social responsibilities. We've got to break away from outmoded creeds and caste restrictions and these sort of very divisive ideas. They were part of our tradition, I agree, but that's not the part we want. We want the golden thread. We want the inner unity. We want the inner light. We want the inner luminosity. And when we say welfare of all beings, it's not only human beings. That is why the Vedas contain beautiful hymns to the mountains, to the rivers, to the oceans, to the forests. Because our rishis realized that if the natural environment is destroyed, then sooner or later the human environment will also disappear. And we are witnessing that in our very lifetimes. And so again, this concept of Bahujana Sukhaya, Bahujana Hitaya is something which we have to accept. We must get rid of iniquitous social structures, and we must move towards a much more inclusive concept of being. And welfare also, mind you, means the capacity to live together in peace and harmony. Otherwise there can be no welfare. And that is why the Vedas say, let us work together, let us think together, let us achieve together, let there be no hatred between us. Sahana vavatu, sahano bhunaktu, sahi viryam karvavahe, tejasvina vadhitamastu, ma vidvishavahe. May there be no hatred between us. There's so much tension nowadays, so much anger, so much hatred. Where have the springs of compassion gone? Why have they dried up? Particularly, each one has to ask ourselves this question. And so, friends, taken together, I submit that these 6 basic concepts of the Vedanta have a validity and inner authenticity and provide a holistic paradigm for a global philosophy, which stresses convergence in place of conflict, cooperation in place of competition, holism in place of hedonism, and interfaith dialogue in place of interreligious wars. It's a difficult path, certainly. There are no soft options left now, either for individual salvation or for a collective well-being. It's a difficult and dangerous path, as the Upanishads tell us. But it is across that difficult and dangerous path that we must travel if we are ever to reach our goal. And our goal is a new society, a new India, a new world, a new kind of consciousness on planet Earth. And I'll therefore end with one of the most celebrated verses from the Upanishads, from the Kathopanishad, which exhorts us to awake and arise and move boldly forwards towards our chosen goals. Uttishtata jagrata prapya varan nibodhata shurasya dhara nishita durataya durgam pathastat kavayo vadanti. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Karan Singh. It would be very presumptuous of me to intrude on the magical spell he has woven on us, other than express our collective gratitude and our appreciation for reminding us at a time when the umbrella of Vedanta, the umbrella of Hinduism, is seeking to cultivate, promote exclusivity in our country, that the voice of people like Dr. Karan Singh, the persuasive, magical voice and words, are an extremely valuable, important reminder to us here personally, to Doordarshan and the webcast that carries these words and images of a philosopher, statesman, as I described him, to the far corners of the country. Our deep gratitude for his focusing and pinpointing the essential truths of the Vedanta, cutting through rhetoric, cultism, institutional aspects of it, to give us what has really been a profound, meaningful experience. Thank you, Dr. Karan Singh.